Oh, it did like a live announcement for the meeting being recorded. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. For those who are in attendance, if you want to say hello in the chat or even drop where you're coming from, we would love to get a sense of who is in our audience.
And while people are trickling in, I'm going to play one of my favorite songs that is about the topic of our webinar today, called Dirt Made My Lunch by the Banana Slug String Band. It's kind of a silly song. Will put a smile on your face. So here we go.
Say you don't believe me? Well, have a listen to this song here. Ha 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 ha. Dirt made my lunch. Dirt made my lunch. Thank you, Dirt. Thanks a bunch for my salad, my sandwich, my milk, and my munch. 'Cause Dirt, you made my lunch. Dirt is a word that we often use when we're talking about that earth beneath our shoes. It's a place where plants can sink their toes. In a little while, a garden grows. Dirt made my lunch. Dirt made my lunch. Thank you, Dirt. Thanks a bunch for my salad, my sandwich, my milk, and my munch. 'Cause Dirt, you made my lunch. A farmer's plow.
All right, just one of my absolute favorites. It brings a smile to my face all of the time. I would also love it if you would type in, along with where you're from, one thing that you're really hoping to learn about today.
Don't be shy. Oh, nice. Kim, how to improve my garden soil. Jerry, the importance of microorganisms in raised beds. Nice. How to garden in serpentine soil. Oh, I love this.
Wow, love it. Plants.
Oh yeah, how to rejuvenate soil. How to improve hard soil. How to keep soil healthy. It's great. I work with clay soil. Thank you all for participating and interacting. Oh, nice. How to use fresh chicken manure in raised beds.
Great. I love seeing what you all are hoping to learn from this webinar. While my slide deck is set, I can always try and tailor some of the slides to these questions, and we'll have plenty of time during the question and answer to get to anything that wasn't covered in the webinar.
Well, we have Natalie joining us from Montana. How cool is that? For those of you who may just be logging on, we are dropping our name, where we're from, and something we are looking to learn about in today's webinar. And thank you for being here.
While we go ahead and wait just a few more minutes, really just another minute or so for folks to trickle in, I'll go ahead and play that sequence again. This is Dirt Made My Lunch by the Banana Slug String Band.
Me? Well, have a listen to this song here. Ha 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 ha.
Dirt made my lunch. Dirt made my lunch. Thank you, Dirt. Thanks a bunch for my salad, my sandwich, my milk, and my munch. 'Cause Dirt, you made my lunch.
Dirt is a word that we often use when we're talking about that earth beneath our shoes. It's a place where plants can sink their toes. In a little while, a garden grows.
Dirt made my lunch. Dirt made my lunch. Thank you, Dirt. Thanks a bunch for my salad, my sandwich, my milk, and my munch. 'Cause Dirt, you made my lunch.
A farmer's plow will tickle the ground. You know the earth is laughed when the wheat is found. The grain is taken and flour is ground for making a sandwich to munch on down.
All right, thank you all for sharing what you're interested in learning about and where you're coming from. We will go ahead and get started with the topic here of growing healthy soil. My name is Annie Silverman. I'm a senior programs coordinator with Daily Acts, and we are able to provide this webinar thanks to the city of Cotati. So huge shout out to the city of Cotati for funding our work, for making this education available and free, and for really being a progressive city in putting forth opportunities to conserve water. I know a lot of people are new to Daily Acts, so I'm going to take a minute and talk about who our organization is. Daily Acts is a holistic education nonprofit that takes a heart-centered approach to inspiring transformative actions that create connected, equitable, and climate-resilient communities. We believe in the power of our daily actions to reconnect people to self, community, and place, which helps to heal our society and planet. So you might be wondering, what does that actually mean? And what does Daily Acts do? So our holistic approach to addressing the current needs starts in the soil and swells into culture and policy change. We have sustainability programs that historically focused on landscape transformation starting all the way back in 2009 by sheet mulching thirsty lawns and selecting beautiful drought-tolerant plants and growing healthy soil like we'll talk about today. Our sustainability programs give people the skills and tools to conserve resources. Because change happens through collaboration, we also invest in strengthening community leadership. Our Leadership Institute for Just and Resilient Communities is a 10-month program that trains leaders to step up to the many challenges our community faces today, while embracing the complexity of the interconnected systems at play. I'll mention that there is still time to enroll for this current cohort and highly encourage you all to check that out. We are also home to the Environmental Health Network that provides education and resources to our frontline agricultural workers in Sonoma County. And we recently adopted the amazing Eco to School program, which inspires and supports youth to take climate action now. We foster networks and alliances while partnering with municipalities like the city of Cotati to do all of this work. We are able to have the impact that we have because of our partnerships, because of all the people that we work together with to create amazing programs. We have installed 37 demonstration gardens. We have run almost 1,500 programs and educated and engaged over 70,000 people. We are able to ripple out these positive changes in the world because of people like you joining us for our program. So a huge thank you for being here today and for taking part in this webinar. So a little bit of housekeeping before we dive in. You can use the chat box like you were to share messages with the whole group. Be sure to set it to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see what you have to share. One of the things that I love about these webinars is that you all have so much information to share. Many of you are experts yourselves, and the chat tends to be this really robust place where you all can share your ideas and participate in another level of education. So please go ahead and use that chat to be able to share your thoughts. Use the Q&A box for any questions that arise during the webinar. We typically save these questions for after the presentation, but I'm joined here by my colleague Liz, who is going to be fielding some of those questions, answering what she can. And if she feels like something is particularly relevant, she will bring that up to me. So you might get some responses from Liz or have Liz chime in here and there. Any resources and links mentioned in the presentation will be sent to you in a follow-up email along with the link to the recording. And it typically takes us about a week to get that out to you all. All right, so let's dive into my very favorite topics, which is growing healthy soil. To paraphrase the words of Charles Eisenstein, if we do not respect the water, then life will not thrive. To heal the water, you have to heal the soil. And to heal the soil, you have to respect the plants. And that is why today, when we talk about growing healthy soil, we're actually going to be talking about soil, plants, and water, because they are all so interconnected. All right, before getting into all of the slides and me talking, I really want to have you all close your eyes and place yourself outside somewhere where there's really healthy soil. You can feel the sunshine on your shoulders, the breeze in your hair, and you're just digging your hands into really healthy soil. And you're thinking, what does it look like? How does it smell? How does it feel? So take a minute and place yourself outside and then dust off your hands and type your observations into the chat box. I'll be checking out the chat box as all of your observations come in. Yeah, I love it. And we could write a poem with all of the observations that are coming through. I'll read some of them out loud here. Oh, it's crumbly in my hands. It has a rich and sweet smell. It's dark and moist and slightly sticky, dark, loamy soil. A little moist and smells of good earth. I think I see a worm. Oh, there's a musty smell. It's fresh. It's alive. It's loose. It's green. It's earthy and rich and thick. It feels light and fluffy and full of texture. Dark brown. Smells a bit musty and earthy. Ah, yes, worms, lots of worms and crumbled dirt parts and sow bugs and some roots from plants or weeds. A dark, humusy or deep humusy smell and crumbly, moist and vibrant soil. Robust, somewhat crumbly. Dark with an earthy smell. It feels like it will clump if you squeeze it. Dark, aromatic, and damp. Dark, moist, fluffy, full of white threads. I love that. You guys are just calling out all of those components of healthy soil. A little bit of moisture, not too dry to the touch. Thank you so much for taking part in that activity. It seems like you all intuitively really know what healthy soil is like, and you described it so well. All right. Now I want you to take a minute, transport yourself to an area of degraded soil that isn't healthy, and try and dig your hands into that soil. and think about, how does it look? How does it smell? And how does it feel? I'm really interested in your observations on the differences between really healthy soil and soil that is not as healthy. Mm. Mm. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, you guys are so good. I'll start reading some of them. Oh, unhealthy soil is like concrete. It's hard, gray, and sterile. It feels and smells like dust. Hard, dry, dusty, no life, dry and dead feeling. May as well be dust or sand. Gray, no aroma, dry, parched, hard, dry, not fragrant, dusty. Dry, hard, no organic matter, sad. It smells dry, looks dry, texturally one dimension. Dry, large clumps, difficult to break up, no worms, no earthy smell. It's dry, sandy, no smell. Oh my gosh, dry. Unhealthy soil is dry. We have got that. Unhealthy soil is dark, is hard to dig in, like plywood on the ground, clay, dry like sawdust, powdery with no life. Dry, light colored and hard, no smell, rocky. Dry, hard, dense, no fragrance, no worms. Dusty, hard packed, no roots. Where are them worms? Compact and homogeneous, or totally clay. Doesn't smell, it doesn't crumble, it doesn't nourish. No bugs, no white strings. Dry and more dusty on the top of it. No life in it. Rocks. Hard to dig at points. Oh my gosh. You all just, you know it. You know what healthy soil feels like, and you know what healthy soil isn't like, which is a really great place to begin this webinar, by just intuitively knowing, by using our senses, what healthy soil feels like and what unhealthy soil feels like. So thank you so much for indulging me in that. And we'll go ahead and get started. So soil is actually made of 25% oxygen, 25% water, 45% mineral content, and 5% organic matter. I was really surprised to learn about this, my more scientific understanding of soil. And I blew my mind that soil is really 25% oxygen and 25% water. So we'll talk a little bit more about that importance of oxygen and water in our soil later on in this slideshow. Of that 45% mineral composition, it's made of sand, silt, and clay. A lot of attention is focused on the mineral content for soil for understanding how water moves through soil. You can't change whether your soil has sand, silt, or clay. That just is. But what you can really focus on and change to create really spongy, healthy, dark, beautiful, rich, textured, porous, with lots of life in it, all those things that you all described, you can create that really healthy soil by spending time in this area right here of soil composition, of mineral content. That is to say that you can build really healthy soil no matter what type of soil or mineral content you're starting with, which is great because a lot of people are starting with really, really heavy clay soils. Or if you're in Sebastopol or in West County, you might have really sandy soils, which can be challenging too to grow in. So we can, through land management and stewardship practices, grow that really healthy, rich, dark, delicious soil. And that 5% of organic matter that really makes that huge difference of how your soil feels, how alive it feels, how rich it is, how much water it's able to store, is composed of 10% organisms, 10% roots, and 80% humus. So humus is the organic component of soil, which is formed by the decomposition of leaves and other plant matter by soil microorganisms. By focusing on nourishing the organic matter in soil, we can all transform our soil into this really beautiful, rich, healthy, vibrant soil that's capable of supporting really healthy plant life. So let's take a deeper look into what that organic matter actually is by looking at this nice soil web here. So part of what is underground is these fungi, and fungi are there that are helping create that kind of stringy effect that a lot of people mentioned. What you're noticing there are the fungal roots called hyphae. And somebody said that soil is actually a little sticky too, like it clumps together nicely. It has really great structure. And that is because of the bioglues that these bacteria are creating that are helping create that soil structure. So we have these single cell organisms. We also have some of the more charismatic decomposers like earthworms and pill bugs and centipedes and millipedes and all kinds of bacteria and fungi and decomposers that are working together in this really complex ecosystem that's helping our soil be that really healthy, dynamic, kind of spongy, deep, rich, vibrant. I could go on. The words you guys used are so inspiring. So you'll hear me say often that healthy soil is like a sponge. One way to visualize the difference between healthy soil and degraded soil is to think about a dry sponge and a moist sponge. Oddly enough, when you run a moist sponge under a trickle of water, it is capable of absorbing more water than a bone dry sponge, which actually sheds water. So healthy soil functions much the same way as a sponge. A spongy soil retains water for plant use. That water in rain form hit and absorbs into the soil column and actually is able to refill our aquifers. And that soil can catch most of the rainfall during a rain event. Whereas this dry soil on the right-hand side sheds water. So when water hits that surface, water is actually going to sheet off of it, and very little water will actually be able to infiltrate and will be available for later use for our plants. So for a little bit of context, a lot of people that are joining us are from the Bay Area, and you all have heard at this point that we are entering into a really serious drought. And if you're in the Russian River watershed, you'll probably have noticed and heard that Lake Sonoma and Lake Mendocino, which are big retention basins for our water, are critically low. Some municipalities are asking people to voluntarily reduce water use while others are mandating it. So we are really at a time where we need to think about creative solutions to being able to create more resiliency in face of these drought cycles that we're more likely to see with more and more frequency. For every 1% increase in soil organic matter, which is a key indicator of soil health, an acre can store an estimated 20,000 gallons of additional water. To put this in perspective, for every 1 acre of land, you can store 2 average-sized swimming pools worth of water, or 4 of those big 5,000-gallon green tanks that you might see if you live in rural Sonoma or Marin County. It's a lot of water. So soil can act as this reservoir that's able to store water for later use instead of allowing that water to hit the surface and then sheet off into storm drains, carrying with it topsoil as well as other contaminants that were on our rooftops or might have been in our yards, or contaminants from agricultural areas containing pesticides and herbicides and dog poop and cat poop and oil that's dripping from cars and all kinds of, like, you name it, anything that you can find in the street, that water is taking all of those contaminants with it and then flowing into our rivers and streams and eventually the ocean. And so by having this really healthy, spongy soil, that water actually is able to be absorbed. And then whatever does run off has been filtered and has far less contaminants. Healthy, spongy soil supports really vibrant plant life, but it also helps regulate our flooding and can really create resiliency when we have droughts, because our soils are able to store water and be able to offer that water to plants as they need it, which relieves pressure from needing to irrigate as frequently, which is really important when we're looking at this drought and we're looking at voluntary or mandatory water reduction. So let's focus on what we can do to grow that organic matter in the soil. Remembering that healthy soil is 25% oxygen. If you have really compacted soil, maybe soil that's been a turf lawn for many years, or soil that has been used as a pathway or a driveway, you'll need to open it up to be able to allow for more oxygen to penetrate. Because all living things need oxygen, and your soil is definitely alive. So you might need to mechanically till, and that will really churn up existing soil structure. It's not recommended if you can avoid it, because it is destructive to the existing structure that's there. But sometimes drastic situations require drastic actions, and then you can begin building your soil health from there. You can also use a broad fork, which actually looks like a culinary fork, but it's much wider, and you can jump on it and you can rock back and forth. And this gently loosens the soil without actually overturning the soil and destroying soil structure. And I want to take a minute to really highlight the Santa Rosa tool library, where you can check out tools. They have garden tools, hand tools, they have some electric power tools as well that can help you for any kind of garden project that you're looking to do. And all you need to do is bring some kind of identification as well as proof that you live in Sonoma County, and they will set you up for sharing and borrowing all of these tools, which really reduces the barrier to getting your own garden started. They have shovels, they have whatever you need, they have it. They're so helpful, and we'll definitely send you the link in the follow-up email. So another thing that you can do if you have really compacted soil is auger little holes into it. And you may have seen this if you have ever seen a golf course that has these little holes in it for aeration purposes, or any kind of turf field. And that's a little bit more specific, site-specific way of opening up the soil and adding oxygen that doesn't churn up the soil. Or you might find that you can get a shovel into your soil pretty easily and you don't really need to aerate it before you get started by adding compost and water. So adding compost and water is really important to create that moisture, which allows these bacteria and decomposers and organisms to thrive, really kickstart that activity. So adding compost and some water really helps create a lot of activity underground, creates the conditions for all of the organisms that you saw in the soil food web to get started and start thriving. And as they're moving around, they're creating more airspace in the soil, which is creating that porosity. If you think back to a sponge, it's creating those little divots that are allowing for more water retention. You can chop and drop. Chopping and dropping refers to pruning practices, where you can take the material that you've pruned and then cut it up into small pieces and leave it covering the soil to decompose, because that is organic matter that feeds feeds all of that complex soil web. And they need that organic matter to be able to digest and then feed themselves and make all of the minerals and nitrogen that's in those chopped pieces of salvia or whatever you're pruning available to the plant again. So it's kind of that full circle where the plant needs the fungal community and the microbacteria community, and the worms and pill bugs and centipedes and whatnot, to be able to digest that and make it accessible again for the plant. But one thing to note when you're chopping and dropping is that we are actually in fire season right now. So we recommend keeping that zone 0, as it's called, that space that's 0 to 5 feet away from your structure, clear of mulch or plant matter. And then in that 5 to 30 feet, which is referred to as zone 1, to keep that more maintained. So you're making sure that you are chopping up, if you do chop and drop, that you're chopping whatever branches into really small little pieces. My colleague Connor was telling us about how he was harvesting his fava beans. He grew a lot of fava beans and was chopping them up into tiny little pieces to be a green mulch, and that it was really exhausting on his hands, because you can just imagine like taking your snips and cutting those into small little pieces. And so you might want to take some of that organic matter, chop it up, and take the rest of it over to your green bin, where it will then become compost at a different facility. You can also cover crop. Cover cropping is a really great way of starting to loosen up that soil, because the roots are penetrating the soil and they're helping create air pockets. And then they're also able to, that plant matter, when you chop it back or when it dies back, will cover the soil and it will help retain moisture. And it's a great way to get an area that you want to start cultivating started with minimal effort. LaBallisters is a really wonderful place to buy bulk cover crop, and we'll give you the information for that one as well. And you can get crimson clover or all different types of seeds that can provide so much beauty with really minimal water that can help prepare that area for future planting. And then lastly, we recommend planting mostly native perennials. So native plants have a very unique relationship with the soil, bacteria and fungal community, and they're a match made in heaven. So you want to have mostly native plants for your soil community. And perennial plants are really great because they sink these really deep roots, which can help then break up the soil and just create that really spongy, rich soil that's capable of absorbing and storing so much water. So we need a healthy microbial community to have healthy soil, and healthy soil depends on plants, and plants are able to have this beautiful synergetic relationship with soil through something called the liquid carbon pathway. LCP is a symbiotic relationship between mycorrhizal fungi and 90% of all plants. Plants produce a little extra carbohydrates that they then feed to their surplus to the soil to feed the fungi. So a fun fact is that there are more individuals residing in a teaspoon of soil than there are humans occupying the space on top of Earth. Like, whoa, mind blowing. You just take a little bit of soil. If you were to be able to see that under a microscope, a really powerful microscope, you could see that it's alive, that it's thriving, that there's a whole community underground. And I think with that perspective, that our soil is alive, our soil is teeming with activity, really helps us shift our management practices to think about what can we do for the soil? How can we nourish the soil? How can we make sure that this living, healthy community flourishes? I want to talk just a little bit more about this synergetic relationship between plants and soil. So plants can harness atmospheric carbon through photosynthesis. They can just harness this carbon, draw it down into the soil, sequester carbon in the soil, which is another huge benefit that can help mitigate the effects of climate change. And then they can transform that carbon, which in the atmosphere is harmful, and turn it into this complex carbohydrates and sugars, which they can then just offer to the fungal community. And you might think, like, why did they do this? Why do plants, why do they give excess nutrients to the fungal community? And it's because there's just this relationship where the fungal community and microbial community is able to feed off of what the plant is offering it, and then in turn break down organic matter that falls on the soil surface level and turn that into food for the plants. And so they need each other. The plants feed the microbes in the fungal community, which then turns around and feeds the plant. So in 1 cubic meter of soil, the fungal community will send out as much as 12,000 miles of hyphae that infiltrate every area of soil and make accessible nutrients the plant wouldn't otherwise be able to access. So just for some context, 12,000 miles is halfway around the world, which is crazy. Just to think about the complexity and the ability of these fungal roots to go everywhere, to every pocket of the soil, and be able to basically be a pipeline for nutrients to the plants. And all of those, everything we saw in that healthy soil web is helping create porosity in the soil. If you think about that area right next to the root zone, all the microbes are trying to get closer to the roots. They're vying for each other for their perfect spot right next to the roots to be able to receive those extra carbohydrates and sugars. And in the process of doing that, they're creating these little microscopic tunnels. And then of course, the worms and centipedes and larger decomposers are creating larger tunnels. And so they're helping aerate the soil as they're trying to get closer to the roots. And so it all just works so beautifully together. And because healthy soil really need plants and healthy plants, I wanted to go over what some of my favorite plants are. But first, we can take a look at, some of you said like white threads in the soil, and that was referring to these, the roots of specific fungus. So mycorrhizae means fungus and root, and you are seeing all of that evidence of the hyphae that are everywhere in the soil, creating this structure and network that then feeds the plants. All right, so some of my very favorite plants here. These slides are taken from our garden office hours conversation on plant selection, and you can see that recording on our website, which goes over many more plants, but I've just highlighted some of my absolute favorites here. We have sticky monkey flower, which is when it's the straight native variety, it's this bright yellow color. There are a lot of different cultivars though, so you can have reds, you can have oranges. One of mine just started blooming and it has this kind of dusty, light yellow color with a maroon. So it's a two-toned variegated sticky monkey flower, which was such a surprise. They grow really well near the coast. You've probably seen them if you've been out for hikes. They attract bees and hummingbirds and butterflies, and they grow to about 3 to 5 feet tall and can be up to 5 feet wide too. They're one of the earliest bloomers. I really appreciate that about them. When everything else is dormant or just starting to blossom, sticky monkey flower are just there and so vibrant and so bright and so beautiful. Another favorite is California lilac, ceanothus. This specific variety, Yankee Point, is a ground cover, and it can reach about 10 to 12 feet wide, so it can really help take up some space and prevent erosion. It has these beautiful lilac colored flowers that are, again, one of the earlier bloomers. It's very, very low water use, so is sticky monkey flower. Once it's established, it needs so little water and can be beautiful and bright and vibrant and lush even during a drought. Another favorite is yarrow. This yarrow in the picture, this is the native, which is white. It is a bee and butterfly magnet. It can grow in full sun to part shade. Again, it can be beautiful and healthy and vibrant even during drought conditions where we're reducing water use. It can grow to about 2 to 3 feet wide and tall. And there are so many different colors. There are just whatever color you can think of, there is a cultivar that can provide that, from salmon colored to paprika to just bright yellow, deep red. It's a really beautiful addition to a landscape. I really love coyote mint with its purple pom-pom flowers. It can grow in full sun to half shade and attracts lots of bees and butterflies and can repel browsing animals. Also important if your garden or your land. We have Douglas iris. This one is really adaptable to many different conditions in your landscape, from full sun to full shade, which is really handy. Super low water use as well. It blooms purple with that white and yellow in the winter and spring, and it attracts moths and butterflies and just is a classically beautiful plant. So right now is a great time to get inspired and to really go out and see landscapes at their most vibrant and beautiful. It's also a great time to prepare your landscape if that's what you're interested in doing, and start putting in place some of the management practices that we talked about that can help you grow that really healthy soil. Some of the pictures featured here on the top left are of our demonstration garden at the Petaluma Library, and we highly recommend that you check out both gardens there. The front garden is tended by the master gardeners, and the back garden is our native garden, and it looks amazing this time of the year. So if you live in Sonoma County, come check out some of these landscapes and get inspired. We also have demonstration gardens in Cotati at Pocket Park and in Windsor at Robbins Park and Foothills Park. And these were taken, I want to say, about a month ago. So you can see just beautiful pops of color. So lovely and so critical in helping grow that healthy soil. So now is a great time to get inspired, and now is also a great time to take advantage of your city's lawn conversion rebate programs if they have one. The pictures here are of a lawn conversion program that we did in Windsor. Residents were able to take advantage of their rebate and transform their thirsty lawn with compacted soils by sheet mulching it, by adding compost and cardboard and mulch to be able to help create that nice, healthy, rich, dark, alive soil so that they can then plant it in the fall, or actually so that they can plant it. We ended up planting this one this spring. But we recommend right now with the drought to really get your landscape ready and start growing that healthy soil, and then plant when the rains come in the fall. So the city of Cotati has a wonderful rebate called the Cash for Grass program, and they'll actually rebate $1 per square foot of turf that you convert. So if you have 1,000 square foot space you're converting, you can get to $1,000 back. And that will more than cover your sheet mulching costs and can offset some of your irrigation and plant costs, and really helps reduce the barriers and encourage people to grow that healthy soil and plant those ecological landscapes and really just create so much beauty in their neighborhoods. So just a huge shout out to the city of Cotati, who really is progressively leading on what cities can do to help conserve water and do so in a way that creates beauty and lots of other benefits as well. If you're in the Sonoma Valley, there's also rebates available to you, and in Petaluma and Santa Rosa as well. So whatever you do, cover your soil, whether you're food gardening, and a lot of people did mention that they were looking at wanting to be able to grow healthier soil in their raised garden beds. It's so important that you cover your soil, because in doing that, you're adding organic matter that can then be decomposed to feed whatever plants you're growing, but you're also keeping it covered, which helps regulate temperature and helps retain moisture and many people described healthy soil as being moist, which is true. Healthy soil is moist because a lot of the microorganisms require moisture to thrive. They need water, as all living things need water. And so keeping your soil covered really helps retain water and create soil health. This photo in the middle is of I believe it's an almond orchard. And in the middle here is a native California buckwheat cover crop that is helping bring in pollinators. It's covering the soil, preventing erosion, keeping that soil nice and cool. And then when it gets tilled in, it will then nourish those trees. And the photo on the right is courtesy of April Owens, who's a wonderful designer. And she has created this beautiful garden where she has used mulch. And mulch, I would say that mulch is a topic on people's minds right now, especially as we're in fire season. The Resilient Landscape Coalition, as well as Fire Safe Marin, have really great webinars talking about fire safer landscaping practices. And the takeaway from those organizations is that they recommend using arbor mulch, which is partially composted to a depth of no more than 2 inches, starting 5 feet away from your structures. And we'll provide some links to Fire Safe Marin as well as the Resilient Landscape Coalition's webinars, because I know a lot of people have these questions on should they use mulch within their landscapes, how to use mulch, what type of mulch, and these are really wonderful resources. And I'm going to take a pause here and check in with Liz and see if there's any questions that should be addressed. And if you haven't submitted questions and would like to, please take a minute to type down your questions.
Yeah, thank you, Annie, and thank you for everybody who's participating in the chat and the Q&A. We've got a few people wondering about the best types of mulch for veggie gardens or overall ground covers. Yeah, a question from Mary, is straw a good mulch in my vegetable garden? And if so, what type of straw?
These are great questions. So we don't actually recommend wood chip mulch in vegetable gardens. As it gets incorporated into the soil is not the greatest because it takes a while to decompose and can actually bind up nutrients and make them less accessible for your plants as it's decomposing. But we do recommend a rice straw. Rice straw is really wonderful. It's supposed to not have as many seed heads in it. If you use a typical kind of hay straw, it might have a lot of seed heads in it, and then you'll see all these unwanted plants that begin to pop up. Or you can, if you are cutting grass that you might have in other areas of your property but don't have seed heads formed yet, you can use that as well. But for what's easy and cost effective and convenient is to get a bale of rice straw and use that to cover your vegetable garden.
Nice, and I think that hits on a few other questions. For example, I see Janice in the chat who says that they cannot use bark of any type in their community. What can you use instead? And I think straw or alfalfa is a great in-between solution if you are looking to have some sort of ground cover, but maybe not a plant.
Yeah, if you can't use mulch of any type, I'm kind of curious to learn more about that and see where you live, if you don't mind sharing what community you're in or just what city you're in. I would love to know more about that. I think that if you can't use any kind of bark mulch, that living mulches are really great alternatives. And those can be ground covers and they can be cover crops. Cover crops you do have to manage because they're usually annual or biannual, but perennial ground covers can be really great options to keep your soil covered and can be really beautiful.
Annie, when we advise people to use arbor mulch, off the top of your head, I can look it up too. Do you know what type of trees they are tripping when using arbor mulch?
So arbor mulch is a combination of whatever is brought into the yard. I know places like Grab and Grow are monitoring it and they're making sure that whatever is part of their arbor mulch mix doesn't contain disease and doesn't contain anything that would be harmful. They screen it for your landscape, but you can't really say specifically what types of trees are part of arbor mulch. It really is just what's brought into their shop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Somebody in the chat, Cynthia, mentions that they have arbor mulch in your yard, but they have a problem with I think the dog vomit is the appropriate name for that fungus. Actually.
Yeah, dog vomit slime. Oh my goodness. I encountered that for the first time last week, and it is truly slimy. I tell you, it really is like a pile of dog vomit.
Mm-hmm. I think it's an indicator of good soil health, though, right? As the mulch is decomposing.
No, it's not harmful, and it can be really unpleasant. It's bright yellow and it has a very unpleasant texture. And you can try and scoop it up and then transport it to another area of your landscape where it won't bother you. You really don't want to try and like mix it in because all the spores will then spread. And by scooping it up, you probably still have some spores remaining. So as you see it, you'll just have to scoop it up and remove it and hope over time that you see less and less of it. Yeah, what an interesting occurrence. I was very perplexed by it when I saw it in my garden last week.
I think one last question that has come up a few times. Do you have any suggestions for where to buy rice straw?
I
think mostly feed stores.
I live in Santa Rosa, and I bought a bale at Western Feed Supply that's in downtown Santa Rosa. I know there's some places in Petaluma where you can get it as well. I would imagine that most feed stores will have it. I think it's about $7 a bale, I want to say, and it lasted several months for us.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Feed stores are a tried and true location to find that. Barless in Petaluma is a great resource. Alrighty, and I think for now that concludes the question answers in the chat. And thank you again to everybody who's participating in the chat and sharing your knowledge as well.
Yes, thank you so much. And we'll continue on. So let me go back to this last slide here. So you're covering your soil, you're really getting inspired, you're visiting gardens and landscapes, and you are preparing for the rains when it's time to plant. And while you're in this process, really dream big, because there is just so much beauty and vitality that you can create when you're transforming a landscape and when you are really focusing on that soil and building healthy soil that can nourish these really beautiful plants. This is a photo of our executive director's home before he converted his turf. And now it is just this gorgeous, if you dig into the soil, there are worms, it's rich, it's just spongy, it smells so good, there's so much activity, there's so much life in there, and it supports these beautiful plants. And it also is able to absorb so much more rainfall and filter it and prevent some of that pollution of water that flows into our storm drains, which then flow directly out and drain out eventually to the sea. So this is a landscape that serves so many purposes. It's beautiful above ground, and it's supporting this really healthy, rich, dynamic community of teeming life, this complex ecosystem below ground. So they're so intrinsically tied together. We need healthy soils and we need healthy plants. And I want to then show you this video which talks about the water climate nexus and how healthy plants and spongy soil can help create more rain and more water, which is so important and needed. So this video can explain things so much more succinctly than I. Without further ado, we'll just take a 3-minute pause and we'll watch this video.
When we think about climate change, we tend to think about carbon dioxide in the atmosphere warming the planet. Carbon is so central to our thinking about the climate that many other important aspects are excluded from the conversation. One of these things is water. Water is actually the dominant greenhouse gas, but its global effects are difficult to measure because it doesn't spread out evenly in the atmosphere like carbon does. Its effect on temperature also depends on the many forms it takes. When it takes the form of a haze, it has a warming effect. When it takes the form of clouds, it has a cooling effect, except for at night, in which it has a subtle warming effect. Since atmospheric water is hard to model, it tends to get ignored. But temperature is not the only important aspect of the climate here. If the climate can be warm or cold, the climate can also be wet or dry. The rampant rise of floods and droughts of our time are said to be caused by climate change, but really they are climate change. While temperature does have some effect on rainfall, floods and droughts are primarily caused by disruptions to the hydrological cycle. We tend to think of the water cycle this way. Rain falls, water evaporates, condenses into clouds, and repeats. But this is only part of the picture, since a lot more happens underground. Healthy soil is like a sponge that soaks up a lot of water. Some of it is taken up and stored by plants, and some of it percolates deep down into aquifers. This groundwater wells up and feeds springs and streams, which allows even more life to thrive. There's then much more water to evaporate from the saturated ground or to transpire through plants. This abundance of water vapor allows for more consistent rainfall. So what happens if we cut down the forest, plow the grasslands, and expose the soil? Without trees or plants to buffer the rain, the heavy downpour compacts the soil. The water can't soak down into the compacted ground, so almost all of it stays above ground and we have a flood. Almost all this water runs off, carrying loads of topsoil with it. And when the rain stops, the little water there is left evaporates very quickly, leaving the ground compact and dry. This lack of percolation depletes the groundwater over time, so it can't feed the streams, which dry up. Now there's no water in the land to feed rain clouds, and we have a drought. If a rainstorm does come, it just creates another flood and worsens the subsequent drought. Instead of consistent rainfall, we have a flood-drought cycle. Fortunately, it is possible to reverse this trend. There are ways to regenerate ecosystems and restore the water cycle pretty rapidly while feeding people in the process. Making subtle changes to the land's topography can slow the flow of water, allowing more of it to soak into the ground and be used by plants. Plants with deep roots help break up the compacted soil, allowing water to percolate deeper. Everyone has a place in reversing the climate crisis. Whether you're working to protect healthy ecosystems, regenerate damaged ones, or just helping yourself or your neighbor depend a little less on industrial agriculture, you are helping the Earth heal.
Right. I just love that video. I think that in 3 minutes, it takes on a really complicated topic and is able to so beautifully explain that relationship between healthy plants, healthy soil, and our water cycle as well. So we can all be part of growing healthy soils. In your own landscape, if you're able to, in the community garden, you can volunteer. Daily Acts is a people-powered organization, and we used to host events where we would have 50 to sometimes even 80 people come out and help us install landscapes and maintain landscapes. And we are so happy that we're going to be able to host some of these in-person events this summer and fall. And we will let you all know when that happens. And we invite you all to volunteer with us and you learn firsthand at these sites what kinds of plants we're using, and to be able to feel that really rich, healthy soil that's been tended to for a decade at some point at some of these sites, and just learn how to plant and maintain plants. We have a webinar on plant maintenance that I also recommend. Just check out some of the resources on our website, because part of really having this healthy soils, having healthy plants, part of having healthy plants is knowing how to maintain them, and knowing how to maintain them for lots of different reasons, including some fire safer practices. So you can educate, you can talk to people about healthy soils, tell them that in this teaspoon of healthy soil, there's more activity than there are people on this planet. Like, just get some of your fun facts and wow people, it'll just blow their minds. Share the silly dirt made my lunch video. Bring a smile to some people's faces and just get the conversation going about how amazing soil is. And you can become civically engaged and be part of that conversation about what your city and county and state and country can do to really protect healthy soils and incentivize people to be able to have the resources and reduce those barriers for people to take part in actions that can help grow healthy soils. We do have an upcoming virtual event on next Thursday, June 3rd from 5 to 6 p.m. Liz, who's here with us tonight, along with our colleague Serena, will be talking about gray water, which is such a relevant topic right now because you're reusing the water that you already used and you already paid for, and you're able to direct it to your landscape to be able to help create that really lush environment while not using any more water. Liz and Serena are going to hold this program in a meeting format, which means that your cameras can be on and you can all talk to each other and share your ideas and resources and know-how, and then ask Liz and Serena some of your individual questions. So it's a really fun, a little less formal format where everybody can see each other and talk to each other. So if you're available next Thursday, we really recommend that you join us for that event. And we have all of our past webinars over the last year plus on our website as well. And a special thanks to our sponsors who help make our work possible. We are also funded by individual donations too. So if you liked what you saw and you would like to donate, you can go to our website and make a donation there. And if you have any questions that weren't addressed or don't get addressed in the question and answer, because we'll have plenty of time for that, you can always send me an email. I really love getting to dive deeper into your questions and learn a lot when I get them and research and think about them and respond. So really, if you have questions and you want to continue this dialogue, please feel free to email me, and I look forward to being able to continue talking dirt with you guys. And with that, I will leave it for more question and answer time. Stop the share.
Amazing job, Annie. Thank you so much for all of your knowledge and wisdom and making this topic really exciting. True to healthy soils, wasn't dry at all. So thank you. We've got a few questions in the Q&A. Please keep them coming as we move along. But we have Betty wondering if you have any suggestions for native shade-loving perennials besides Douglas iris.
Yeah, so there's some really great ones. There's Fragaria chiloensis, or a ground cover strawberry that can be a really great ground cover for shadier environments. There's also ribes, various different currants. They're not great for full shade, but they can handle part shade. And there's a ribes sanguineum, I believe it's King Edward. And that one has just beautiful drooping purple flowers and creates a fruit that's not as edible for humans, or not as delicious for humans, but really great for birds. And so that anything in the ribes genus can be good for part shade environments. There's also Mahonia, or Oregon grape, and that one can be a really good in shadier environments. And then for some non-natives, there is some really cool different heucheras that can have vibrant splashes of color and can be yellow, to maroon, to burgundy. So there's lots of fun options. On our Garden Office Hours Conversations plant selection webinar, my colleague Connor actually highlights 5 plants that are really good for shady situations. So you can always check that out. And there's some really wonderful CNPS, California Native Plant Society, has great lists of plants that thrive, native plants that thrive in part shade or full shade.
Yeah, great plug. We should be reminded of when their plant sale is, and we can include that in our follow-up email as well.
Definitely. I think it's sometime in October.
That sounds about right.
Mary says Yerba Buena, a native heuchera from Cal Flora Nursery. Yeah, this is great. If you want to drop in some of your favorite shade-loving plants in the chat here, that would be awesome.
We'll go back to the Q&A. And so we have Cynthia asking, how long does it take for hard, dry, rocky soil to become dark, spongy, and healthy soil?
Well, if you start the process and really add compost and cardboard and keep it covered, I've noticed changes within a season to 2 seasons. Our front yard was, say, like clay loam soil, and we started sheet mulching it in it's been 3 seasons now, and I can pretty easily dig into most areas and have earthworms, and I even saw some of that kind of white strings of fungal activity and fungal roots in the soil that made me so happy. So you can see changes starting as soon as 1 season, but I would say take like 3 to 4 seasons before you really have that rich, spongy, dark, lovely soil. And a question was, do you add compost and cardboard each year? No, you actually don't need to add compost and cardboard each year. Once you really jumpstart that microbial bacteria and you start having roots in the soil, they'll just form this really lovely kind of self-perpetuating cycle. So you don't, especially for native plants and native adapted plants, you don't really need to keep adding soil and cardboard. But you do need to keep adding mulch, because mulch and the bacteria will actually decompose the mulch and turn it into humus. And so you will need to keep adding some layers to keep that soil covered. So it's perfectly normal and natural, and actually really great when your mulch starts to disappear.
Mary is wondering if you can have too much nitrogen in your veggie garden.
Yes, yeah, that's actually a problem, especially if you're growing, say, tomatoes or peppers or anything that fruits. Nitrogen is really great for having that vibrant, green, quick plant growth. And when you have too much nitrogen, the plant is actually focusing so much energy in growing out its leafy green part and has less resources to be able to develop that bud and fruit set. So you might have a beautiful tomato and no tomatoes. Or you might actually, I believe too much nitrogen can lead to kind of a yellowing of leaves as well, and really makes the plant more attractive for various different pests who are attracted to that really nitrogen rich plant. So yeah, too much can be a bad thing.
How would you combat too much nitrogen?
We try and bring it into balance by adding more carbon. So adding more leaf clippings, adding more organic matter. It could be like, you could add some cardboard or shredded newspaper, or any kind of carbony type material that's chopped up into small pieces, or if it's cardboard that's just layered over it. So you want to create this balance between carbon and nitrogen.
Love it. I like Shelly's question here. This is something we discuss often at Daily Acts, and especially right now during the drought. So Shelly asks, during the drought cycle, are you adding water to the sheet mulching layering that you are proposing?
Really, really, really good question. So if you are starting to do your sheet mulching right now, I would recommend wetting down that cardboard as you're doing that initial sheet mulch. And that helps for a lot of reasons. It can keep the cardboard down, like, instead of flying away. And it can help create that moisture that you're trying to seal in with your mulch layer. And so you're starting off with a really well hydrated soil. You actually probably water your soil first, and then lay down that cardboard, water the cardboard, lay down your compost, and then the mulch. And that mulch is helping to seal in that moisture. I wouldn't recommend, this is such a good question, and we're really trying to come up with what these best practices are in light of these droughts and fires. And so at this point, I wouldn't recommend continuing to water just a sheet mulched landscape, but I would definitely recommend watering it while you're doing it. And know that these suggestions are evolving too. So we're all learning as we're stepping into these unprecedented times. Like, it's May and we're already in fire season, and we're facing a huge drought. And so we're all adapting to the unknown. But at this time, that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, thank you. We've got a few folks asking questions that I would say are related to rocks. Are you familiar with serpentine soil, Annie? And if so, can you comment on any gardening with serpentine soil?
I'm not familiar with serpentine soil, so we'll have to save that for the follow-up and I'll do some research on it.
Yeah, I was doing a little bit of quick research and it seems like it's a pretty uncommon soil type produced by weathered rock. So very unfamiliar with that specific type of soil, but hopefully we can do some research and get back to you on that, Jim. And we've got another question in a similar vein, or at least I would say so, where Tom asks how much rock is okay in healthy soil. He says that his yard is covered in pea gravel at about 1 inch and is wondering if he can add soil on top.
That's a good question. My initial response is that I would try and take back some of that pea gravel and start layering over soil. I think that pea gravel is a really great resource that you can use in zone 0, which is that 0 to 5 feet where you want a semi-permeable surface to be able to create that fire protective area. So I would probably, I know it's a lot of labor, but I would scrape back some of that rock and then start layering and building your healthy soil from there. I'm also curious whether people have different ideas or think that you could just start on top of that pea gravel. I would be concerned that plants, as they're sinking their roots, they're going to hit that pea gravel and there's going to be larger air pockets where their roots might hit air and dry out. You want some air pockets, but not really big air pockets. So that would be my concern, but I think that's a good question. Put it out to the audience.
Would you recommend that folks get their soil tested before starting any sort of gardening? And if so, where would you recommend they get it tested?
If you suspect that there might be any kind of significant contamination, maybe you are gardening in an area where you know that there's been commercial activity, or you just are wondering, maybe it's a really old site and you just don't know what's been there. You could always get your soil tested in native and native adapted plant gardening. I haven't needed to get soil tested. I think the sheet mulching and the kind of land stewardship practices have been enough to be able to create that healthy soil and go from there. Food gardening can be a little bit trickier, and your soil, they're more intensive feeders and they're more on an annual basis, so your soil can become depleted more. And so for food gardening, I think it can help you tell you more. But in most landscape situations, I don't think it's necessary. And I don't know off the top of my head where you can get soil testing done. Master gardeners, UC Master gardeners after the 2017 fires did a lot of soil testing because they were curious about the ash and whether ash from residential house fires basically would contaminate the soil. And they used a Bay Area local place to get that tested so we can find out. Or if anybody has suggestions or has gotten their soil tested from somewhere, you can drop that in. It's definitely interesting to see what comes back, but I don't think in most situations, I don't think it's totally necessary.
We've had a few folks mentioning Harmony Farm Supply in Sebastopol being a good resource for soil tests.
Okay, great.
There's been a few questions and comments regarding the sheet mulching process. Annie, would you mind giving just a high-level overview of that process and maybe a little bit of tips for maintenance?
Sure, yeah. So we do a lot of sheet mulching at Daily Axe. Both Liz and I have done lots of sheet mulching. And the purpose of, lots of sheet mulching. The purpose of sheet mulching is to be able to compost a lawn in place, or to be able to start building that really healthy soil over degraded soil or compacted soil. And we are actually in the process of changing up the way that we sheet mulch. We are now adding 1 inch of compost, or sorry, that's the old way. We are now adding our cardboard barrier, and then we're adding, wetting it down, adding 1 inch of compost, and then 2 inches of arbor mulch. And so the whole purpose of that is to have you're jump starting the microbial activity in your soil by adding compost and water. And you're letting those microbes really do their work in loosening up the soil and in making accessible to plants the nutrients in the soil. And then the compost on, or sorry, the mulch on top is helping prevent water from evaporating. And it itself is also carbon. And so it's food for microorganisms too to digest. And all of that can really help you create a blank slate that's just fomenting really healthy soil for you to plant. There are maintenance requirements with sheet mulching, though, especially if you're sheet mulching over an area that has invasive plants in it, like Bermuda grass or crabgrass or oxalis or, oh gosh, there's so many more that can be problematic. If you have those plants present in your landscape, then when you sheet mulch, you'll knock them back, but you'll see that they reemerge, and you'll really have to get in there and hand pull them. But fortunately, the process of sheet mulching actually makes their roots a lot more shallow. And it makes them easier to pull up. And so as they grow in, you'll be able to more easily pull them up, but it will be ongoing maintenance on your part. Sheet mulching creates that beautiful blank slate, but it can be deceiving because it's only this beautiful blank slate for a week or two before things start growing back in.
Thank you. Could you highlight some of the plants that were shown in Trathan's garden?
Oh, okay, sure. Trathan has, I think he has some salvias, some really beautiful different types of sage. He has a lot of gorgeous flowers in his garden. He actually has intermixed his front yard with edibles too. So you probably saw some artichoke. I'm actually going to go back to that picture to jog my memory. One sec.
Yeah, I love that he was able.
Oh, I see some what looks to be a deer grass there in the front. You actually can see that he does have oxalis growing, which some people can in the very forefront. I'm not showing my screen, so you can't see that anymore. But he does have some oxalis growing, which is that little yellow flower in the forefront. Some people think it's a nuisance, but I think it really is beautiful too. He has some fruit trees. I believe there's a peach tree that might be the really brilliant, beautiful pink blossoms that you saw, and calendula growing in there, and just a big mix of beautiful plants. And you can see a lot of the plants that he used in his landscape at our model sites. We kind of use a similar palette of our favorite plants, and we can actually share in the follow-up email the link to our plant selection webinar, so you guys can just peruse some of the plants that we've chosen for that one as well.
Oh, interesting. Shelley is wondering how Trathan's garden is watered. Is it drip? It's definitely not overhead sprinklers, and I doubt it's a hose. Do you know, Annie?
He has drip.
He's got drip, okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Kim is asking about cover crops and wondering if you can talk a little bit more about using cover crops to build soil. And similarly, what's the maintenance of those cover crops? Are you cutting them back a few inches every year?
Okay, so cover crops, if you would like to have a cover crop that you don't want reseeding itself annually, maybe it's an area that you don't always want cover cropped, then I would recommend cutting back whatever the plants that you've planted before they go to seed. One of my favorite cover crops is crimson clover. It has just these beautiful, beautiful little 2-inch long red deep crimson flower heads. And if you want to have that once, but not for a long time, then you are going to come through and either mow it back, you can weed whack it back, you can just hand chop it back. It depends on the size and scale. And then you can just leave that covering the area, or you can chop it into smaller pieces if they're really big chunks. Leave that to cover the area, and that will then decompose and help nourish the soil. Some people might not want to leave the entirety of it if it's too thick or if it seems a little unsightly. You can remove some of it, but it really is good to leave that covering the soil, because not only do the roots, in the case of crimson clover, fix nitrogen into the soil, but all plants are going to be able to transform atmospheric carbon into plant nutrients. So the roots are doing their work. You can leave the roots in the soil instead of pulling it up. You can just cut it back, and then that will all decompose in place. Or you can, if you want it to reseed over time, you can leave those flowers in place, let them go to seed, let those seeds drop, and then they'll self-seed. And that's how annual cover crops work. And then there's ground covers, and ground covers can be perennial, in which case you can just leave them be and maintain them as needed.
Nice, thank you, Annie. Jerry is asking, can I use rice straw instead of arbor mulch when sheet mulching?
Yeah, you can. You can use rice straw, you can use leaf litter, you can use any kind of carbony material instead of wood mulch.
Nice, thank you. We've got a few people in the chat sharing their experiences with the sheet mulch process and how it has helped to keep moisture on site while also being a weed barrier. And we still have a few minutes left before we are set to wrap up. So if there are any outstanding questions, comments, or anything at all, we are here for you.
Yeah, Charlene's comment about sheet mulching, but then with the, this winter we had so little rain, and the cardboard seemed to act more like a barrier from rain infiltrating than really helping create the sponge. So that's tough. This winter was really hard. A lot of people planted wildflower seeds and didn't see a lot of germination because we just didn't get the rains to really sustain them. We recommend now, especially in light of this last winter, we recommend wetting down your cardboard as you're sheet mulching, because that does help jumpstart that decomposition, and at least you're starting with hydrated cardboard to begin with. But it is challenging as we're not getting these weather cycles that are predictable and really aren't delivering the rain that we thought they would. For the dog vomit in a different area, you're just kind of moving it out of where you want it. I'm not sure if covering it would prevent it from proliferating in a different area or not. When I read about it, it really recommended get it out of the area that you're seeing directly and put it in the garbage instead of putting it in the compost or the green bin, because you don't want to spread the spores all over the place. I'm not really sure how you would eradicate it. From what I read, it's really about getting it out of the area where you see it and it bothers you.
Shelly had some really sweet words shared in the Q&A. I'll read it out loud, Shelly. She says, at the age of 70 this year and farming for the last 30 years, I'm so happy and hopeful to see so many young people working on the environmental and climate issues of the day. Thank you. That was sweet, Shelly. Thank you.
It takes a community to create change, and we really look forward to being back in person so that we can get to know each other and really have that beautiful, complex activity happening below soil. We can create that community where we're all interconnected and we're all helping each other and we're all benefiting from each other. And we're all part of supporting each other and inspiring each other and really just forming that rich mycelial network of people to create change in this community and keep each other company too. Man, it's been a lonely, lonely year. I love our events. We're making new friends and meeting new people. So we really look forward to being able to host those in the future and invite you all to take part in them.
Well said, Annie.
Yeah.
It looks like the chat and the Q&A is coming to a slow trickle and a lot of folks expressing gratitude, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. It's really amazing that 50 plus people showed up from 4 to 5:30. We are just so grateful that you all are taking the time to learn and share and be part of our community and participate. I absolutely loved hearing all of your descriptions about soil. It really it's so inspiring to get started for this webinar.
Someone said in the chat when you were reading that out that we really should be publishing a poetry book because you read it so beautifully.
Right?
One last question we've got here.
All right. Thank you all.
Oh.
Go for it.
Alrighty, so somebody was asking about manure and using manure for the sheet mulch process. I had done a private chat and I suggested that they mix the manure into their soil, but what are your thoughts on that, Annie?
So fresh manure, especially with fresh chicken manure, can be really high in nitrogen and can actually burn plant roots. So I'd recommend if you can let it sit for a while, and that will help it break down a little bit, and then add it into your soil. I've heard 6 months is suggested amount of time, but that was when I was living way further north and it was a lot colder. And so here, where it's a lot warmer and microbes are more active, it might be less time. But I wouldn't recommend taking fresh chicken manure and mixing it in to the plant root zone.
I'm documenting the few things that we didn't have answers to, so we'll be sure to include different resources and information in our follow-up email, and of course the recording to this program.
So to answer Jerry's question about when the recording will be available, we will try to get it out to you within a week. This is a long weekend, and I'm going to be out of town for some of that time. So it'll probably take us the full week to get you the recording. We hope to get it to you by next Wednesday, or possibly even next Thursday or Friday. It might be a little longer because of the long weekend, but we'll get it out to you.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, and please feel free to send it out to other people who you think it might be a resource to.
Absolutely, and we're always here as a resource, so don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions whatsoever.
Yeah, definitely. It's really fun actually to open up your inbox and get questions about the webinars you were in. So don't feel like you're bothering us. It's very enjoyable.
Agreed. Well, with that, it may be appropriate to close.
All right. Yes. Great. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, so much. All right. Take good care. I'll go ahead and end this webinar now.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.